Tommy turned and walked away and left Jimmy lying on the ground. Kenny felt bad for Jimmy, but he wasn't about to tell the truth. He knew what would happen if he did. As little Jimmy tried to pick himself up off the ground, he could barely move. He hurt so badly when he got up. His shirt was all bloody. He limped off towards the woods to go find a place to hide. He didn't know, a few days later he would have a visitor. As a black car pulled in the driveway, Jimmy heard it, but he didn't know who it was. He did have a feeling it wasn't good though. He pulled the curtains back and looked out, and by this time a man had gotten out of the car. He was wearing a suit, and Jimmy thought to himself, he looked like a cop. Then, all of a sudden, he got a sharp pain in his stomach. As the man turned toward the house, Jimmy saw his badge and then he was really scared. Jimmy didn't know his mom had put him on probation because Helen had said he kicked her in the stomach. He just knew the man was there to lock him up. Jimmy tried to think of where he could hide, but there was no way for him to get past the man. So, he just sat there as the fear ran through him like a train. It made him shake as the tears ran down his face and he began to sob. He couldn't understand why she lied on him and beat him just because he was hungry, so he had made a bologna sandwich. Was that such a crime? He just knew the man was going to take him away. He knew he didn't do anything wrong, but they lied on him anyway just to get rid of him. The man asked Jimmy what had happened and he replied, "She was pulling my hair out by the handful. All I did was put my feet up to keep her from pulling out all of my hair." The man just looked at him and said, "Okay," like he did something wrong. Then he said, "I need you to get in my car." Jimmy was so terrified that he couldn't even breathe. So, the man grabbed him by the arm and forcefully led him to the back seat of his car. Jimmy pulled away, but there was no use because the man was too strong. He put him in the back and got behind the wheels. He started the car. As they pulled out of the driveway, Jimmy looked out the back window while tears rolled down his face. He was so scared. The last thing he saw was his mom and grandmother laughing at him. He didn't know where the man was taking him. The man took him to Pocomoke City to a group home, where he would stay for almost a year. No one had even come to visit him, not even once. He felt so alone, but that was nothing new to Jimmy. He really hated this place. He was always in trouble and he wanted out of there so bad. He made up his mind to run away because he had been there for almost a year now. The next day, after everyone was asleep, he made his move. He was so tired of feeling trapped. So, he opened his door. He looked both ways and the coast was clear. He made his way down a long hallway. There was a door at the end. As he walked up to it, he slowly unlocked the latches and peeked out to make sure it was clear. He didn't see anybody, so he went out and pulled the door shut behind him so as to not wake anyone. The group home was on 2nd Street. As he made his way down the street, no one was out, so he just kept walking until he got to the highway. When he was on the highway, he put his thumb up and tried to hitch a ride. Cars were passing him, but they didn't stop. By now Jimmy was getting really tired, though he knew he couldn't stop, and so he kept going. After 3 hours of walking, someone stopped and Jimmy ran up to the car. They opened the door, then Jimmy looked inside the car, said, "Thanks for the ride," and hopped in. As he pulled the door shut, the man asked, "Where are you headed?" And he replied, "Pittsville." The man told him he was going as far as Parsonsburg, and Jimmy knew it wasn't far from there to his grandmother's house, maybe about 4 more miles. Jimmy was thinking, at least it was about the right temperature outside. It was about 70 degrees. As they went down the highway, it was starting to rain a little, and the guy spoke up then said, "Looks you're going to get wet," but Jimmy didn't say anything. He just sat there as they went down the road, watching the rain hit the windshield. As they got to Parsonsburg, the rain had picked up. Now it was coming down pretty hard. The man put on his blinker and mashed the brakes. As he got in the turning lane, he pulled to a stop and looked at Jimmy and said, "Sorry, this is as far as I'm going." So Jimmy opened his door and got out. He said, "Thanks for the ride." The man nodded back. Jimmy shut the door and stepped back as the man pulled away. Jimmy's legs were sore from all the walking, but he knew he was so close. The rain was still coming down and Jimmy was soaked to the bone by this time, but he didn't stop walking. About 2 hours later, he was half frozen. His legs hurt so bad, he was so tired. His arms and legs had gone numb a long time ago from the cold rain. He was almost there. He could see his grandmother's house now, but he was moving as slow as a snail. He never thought he could be so cold and exhausted. As he walked up the driveway, it stopped raining. He stopped for a moment to make sure his grandmother didn't see him coming as he got closer to the house. He did a quick scan of the yard. As he looked around the corner of the house, he figured she was working in the chicken house and made his way to the door. He gently opened the door. As he came in, he closed the door behind him and headed to another door that went upstairs. His legs hurt so bad that he could hardly lift them to go up the steps. There were 3 rooms up there, but one was for company, so Jimmy knew they wouldn't come in there, at least, he hoped not. He tiptoed to the door and paused for a bit. He thought he heard someone, so in a hurry he went in the room, pushing the door closed. There was a bed and a nightstand by the bed. He stood there for a bit, making sure no one heard him as he undressed and took his shoes off. He could not get under those covers fast enough. He quietly pulled the blankets down and sat on the side of the bed. His feet were so waterlogged and as cold as ice. He turned and slipped his feet under the blankets, then pulled the blankets up to his neck, trying to get warm. The next day, the rays from the sun lit up the room, shining through the window on his face as he woke up. He rubbed the sleep out of his eyes to help wake himself. He didn't want to make a sound. Jimmy knew if his grandmother heard him, she would go off on him again. He thought to himself, why did I come here? This was a bad idea, but he didn't know of anywhere else he could go. At least his clothes had dried on the bright side. He really didn't want to have to put wet, cold clothes back on. Then he heard someone talking, and all the fear came rushing back. It made him shudder with fear all at once. He was really scared as he tiptoed to the window to see who it was. As he paused, afraid to look, he peeled back the curtains just enough to see, and to his surprise it was his probation officer. He was telling his grandmother that he had ran away from the boys' home and that he had to go to court on the 10th of the next month. If she happened to see Jimmy, to call immediately. He pulled a card out of his pocket and gave it to her. Jimmy stumbled backwards and fell in the floor with a thump. He scrambled to get up off the floor and his legs felt like rubber bands from all the working. All of a sudden, he was terrified. So, he used his arms and dragged himself under the bed to hide. Later on that day, Jimmy got very hungry. He hadn't eaten since the day before and he could hear his stomach growling like an angry dog wanting food. As he sat there on the edge of the bed, he got up, went to the window, and then looked out as he saw Kenny with Michelle out in the yard playing. Kenny was doing something to Michelle's back. Out of the corner of his eye, Jimmy saw Helen open her mom's door as she walked inside. Jimmy knew it was his chance to go down to the kitchen and get something to eat. He made his way back over to the door, opened it, and made his way downstairs. When he got to the kitchen, he opened the refrigerator and saw bologna. He grabbed it, then some cheese and a paper plate off the table. He put the bread on the plate to make a sandwich. Then, he put it all together in a hurry and put it all back in the refrigerator before someone came in. He took his sandwich and went back upstairs in the room. He sat down on the edge of the bed and ate it. He never thought a sandwich could taste so good. When he finished it, he was still hungry and wondered if he could go make another sandwich without getting caught. He walked back to the window to look and make sure no one was coming. He found himself back in the kitchen as he made another sandwich. The door opened as he turned with his sandwich in his hand and fear in his eyes as his grandmother walked in. He stopped in his tracks, afraid to move. He could see fire in her eyes. She grabbed him by his hair and was jerking him all around by the hair of his head. He let out a scream from the pain, but she didn't seem to care and led him out the door towards her mother's trailer to use the phone. As they were crossing the yard, he gave a hard pull and felt his hair being ripped out by the roots. It hurt so badly, but he knew he had to get away from her. She yelled at him, "Come back here, you little bastard." But he didn't stop. He ran around the corner of the house and into the woods to hide. Helen called his probation officer and told him Jimmy had been there. He asked, "Is he still there?" She said, no, he took off, and that she didn't know where he had gone. She also didn't know where he was hiding in the woods. On the 10th of September, Jimmy had to go to court again. He thought if he went to court they would let him go back to Helen's house, but boy was he wrong. While he was in the courtroom, his dad showed up and started talking to the judge. Somehow, he got custody of Jimmy, and he wound up living with Bill for almost a year. Jimmy was about 16 now. He walked out of the courtroom with his father and they left. As Bill pulled in his driveway to his new house, they both got out of the car and went inside. His new stepmother Janice was cooking dinner. She and Bill had 2 kids, so Jimmy had 2 more half-siblings. Bill sat down at their kitchen table and told Jimmy, down the hall to the left is your room. So, he walked down the hall to have a look at his room. He opened the door and the room was piled up with toys. He got excited because he thought the toys were his. So he went back out in the kitchen to ask his dad where did all those toys come from and if the toys were his. Before his dad could answer, Janice snapped. No. Those are not your toys. They belong to my kids. Jimmy had just got there and he could tell she didn't like him and was going to be mean to him. While they were sitting at the table eating dinner, Jimmy just picked at his food because he was nervous about his dad's new wife. He just had a feeling something had to be going on. He thought to himself, why his dad wanted him after all this time, and if he ever actually cared about him. Why did he come and get him? One day, Jimmy saw the mailman bring the mail, and he went out to get it so he could give it to his dad. He glanced down at one of the letters in his hand and read what it said. It said, Child Support Services, and he thought it to be a check. Then, at that very moment, he knew why his dad came and got him. It was just so he could get money out of him. As he was walking back to the house, 4 or 5 kids from up the street tried to start a fight with him. Mark, he was about Jimmy's size, ran up to Jimmy and pushed him. He made him drop the mail he was holding. Jimmy turned around and punched Mark with such force he hit the ground with a thud. Bill walked out the door and he saw what Jimmy did, so Bill made him fight one of the older boys as they didn't seem to mind because they didn't like him anyway. The next boy was Brad. He was older and was much bigger and stronger too. At this time Jimmy didn't know how to fight good yet, so needless to say this time Jimmy got beat up. So his dad then gets the oldest boy, his name was Phil, to kick the shit out of Jimmy. It didn't seem to bother Bill as he watched those boys hurting Jimmy. Then they all left and Bill took Jimmy in the house and beat him with his big wide leather belt as he held him by the arm. As they went around like a merry-go-round, Jimmy tried to jump up so the belt would miss him, but there was no use. By the time his dad stopped beating him, he had big welts on his back and legs. Then, Bill sent Jimmy to his room. Later on that day when they had dinner, Janice would put way too much food on his plate. She done it because she knew he couldn't eat that much. Then she would have Bill take up his belt and beat Jimmy if he didn't finish his food just because she didn't like him. He wasn't her kid. Jimmy never liked her from the beginning. Seemed like the beatings never stopped and Jimmy always had bruises all of the time. Jimmy thought all Janice wanted was for his dad to beat the hell out of him and spend his dad's money. Jimmy was 16 now, and he wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend or do anything. They always go to the bar every Friday and Saturday. They started bringing him from then on, but he didn't know why. Jimmy liked it when they took him there because he danced with some hot women, and they would let him drink mixed drinks too. The last time he got sick, but he wasn't sick this time, he was dancing with a hot-looking lady named Rose. He glanced over to where Bill and Janice were sitting at the table as he saw them going towards the door. He thought they forgot about him, so he stopped dancing and followed them. Bill opened his door to his '72 Dodge Charger as he got in. Jimmy did the same. He thought they were leaving and going home as he got in the middle. Then Janice got in and closed the door. She said, "Not now, Bill." He just looked at her and pulled out a funny-looking cigarette and a lighter. As he lit it, he inhaled it, then handed it to Jimmy. So he put it to his mouth and took a few puffs. Then he coughed really hard a few times. Then he handed it to Janice. She passed it back and forth till it was gone. Jimmy never felt like this before. It seemed like that stuff made pain go away. He really felt happy for once in his life. Though he still got beat on all the time, Janice would even beat on Jimmy while Bill was still at work. Nothing could make that go away. It was like living a nightmare every day of his life. This went on for a little more than a year. One day Jimmy was sitting on the steps. A big Ford car pulled in the driveway, but he didn't know who it was. Then all at once the door opened and Kenny stepped out. He said, "What are you doing, Crow?" That's what everyone had started calling Jimmy. Kenny asked Crow if he wanted to smoke a joint and he said, "Sure." At least it helped his pain go away for a little while. "Hey, my dad smoked one with me last week at the bar." Kenny said, "No way." As he walked back to the car and waited for Crow to get in the car. They drove off down the street. Kenny said, "This is my cousin Crow." The guy driving said, "Hey, Crow." He said hi back to him, and at the same time Kenny had lit it and passed him the joint as he puffed on it for a minute, then passed it to the guy driving. Crow had never met him before, so he didn't ask who he was. They drove around a little while they smoked. They made their way back to Jimmy's dad's house. As they got there, he saw his dad's car in the driveway. Kenny didn't like his Uncle Bill. Kenny had come to spend the night with Jimmy one time, and Bill beat both of them with a belt for no reason. As soon as Kenny saw his car, he was ready to leave. This was the first time he had seen Kenny since Jimmy had been at his grandmother's, except the one time he came over to spend the night. So they let Crow out of the car and drove off. As he walked across the yard, he went up the steps and opened the door. Bill was waiting for him as he came through the door. Bill took his belt off and grabbed him by the arm and hit him repeatedly with the belt till he had whelps all over his back, arms and legs. When he did stop, he went to his room crying uncontrollably, then cried to himself and wished he was never born. Jimmy was so sick of the beatings, he had all this anger built up inside. He jumped up so mad and slammed open his window. Then he took some of his clothes and climbed out carefully till he reached the ground. He was so upset at how his dad had treated him and wondered how Janice brainwashed him into being like this. It was so unfair. He said to himself, "I should let the air out of his tire, that way he can't come look for me." He bent over and used his fingernail to let the air out. He didn't want to get caught. Jimmy decided to go back to his grandmother's house and was hoping Kenny would help him hide out. Although it wasn't long after that Helen had found out he was there. So she picked up the phone and dialed his dad's number. It rang once, twice. Janice then answered the phone and said, "Hello." A voice spoke up and said, "This is Helen, Jimmy's grandmother, and I was calling to ask Bill if he knew Jimmy was at her house." Janice said no, and that she would tell Bill. A week later, an officer caught him and took Jimmy to a holding place in Cambridge where he would stay 6 months. Till he went to court again, and he didn't like this place. One day he came through the kitchen of the place and he didn't know someone had spilled water on the floor. As he was rounding the counter, he slipped and hit his head on it.